Hello, my name's Tim. Welcome to Tim Burbage Reads, and today we're going to try something a little bit different. So I have finished my fantasy bingo board for the year. So r/fantasy subreddit has a bingo board challenge that runs from the 1st of April to the 31st of March, and there's 25 squares, and I have finished it. I've completed it. So I want to run through what I read, what the challenges were, and what I thought of the books. So hopefully this works. This is my first time doing this, so fingers crossed. Right. I found this template on the Reddit itself. You can go in and you can type your books and what comes out. So the first challenge I'm reading from left to right is first in the series, and I chose for this Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshigatsu Kawaguchi. This is a story about a coffee shop in Tokyo where you can drink the coffee in a particular way, a particular coffee in a particular place, and it allows you to travel in time. This is a short book where we have 4 different characters, each drink the coffee for different reasons. And the stories kind of commingle. And it's an interesting look at family and regret and what we would do potentially differently. This was hard mode because hard mode was the series had to be at least 5 books. And I think the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series is 5 books at the moment, I think. Will I read more of them? Yes, I will, because I really enjoyed this. But I'm not desperate to read more because each book, the first book was kind of a story in itself, and it was a satisfactory read. The next was an alliterative title. For this, I chose The Sword in the Stone by T.H. White. This didn't hit hard mode for me because it had to be at least 3 words. And I could have chosen The Witch in the Wood as well. From The Once a Future King, because I read that as well. Sword in the Stone, I enjoyed it. It was actually surprisingly similar to the Disney movie than I was expecting. And I read The Witch in the Wood, and then I started The Ill-Made Knight, and I was like, actually, I need a bit of a break from this, and I'm coming back to it later. Next was Under the Surface. This was a story that involved needing to be underwater or in caves, and hard mode was it spent more than 50% under the surface. And for this, I chose Dungeon Runners Hero Trial by Kieran Larwood. I read this to my son, and it's about going inside a dungeon. And dungeon running is like a game show. It's like a sport. And we've got the main character, who I think is called Kit, goes in and tries to form a team, and they're a bit of a ragtag group of losers. And they go into the dungeon. And the majority of the book is spent in the dungeon. I also think the town that they're in feels underground. So that's why I ticked hard mode. The next was Criminals. Hard mode was it had to be a heist. Gamora Nebula Sisters in Arms by Mackenzie Lee. I put this in here. This is about the MCU characters of Gamora and Nebula, both sent to a planet to complete a heist. And I liked that the planet itself was relatively unextraordinary, but the characters I thought were really good. The reason why this wasn't more, I just think Nebula's a more interesting character than Gamora. That's a fact. Next was Dreams. This was a book where the main character had dreams. I chose The Hidden Oracle by Rick Riordan, the first in the Trials of Apollo series. Any of you who have read Rick Riordan know that dreams play a really big part in his stories. It didn't trigger hard mode because the hard mode was the dreams are not prophetic. And Rick Riordan, the demigods and gods kind of communicate through dreams, and they are always prophetic in some way. So I didn't trick hard mode for that. I wonder how many books actually have dreams that aren't prophetic in any way. Because if I was writing a book and I had a dream that didn't mean anything, then I would cut it from the book. Right, let's see if I can move this down. Let's see if this works. So the next was entitled Animals, and I read The 101 Dalmatians by Dodie Smith. Hard mode for this was the animal has to be mythical or fictional, such as dragons or unicorns and things like that. And Dalmatians are very real. I did also read the sequel called The Starlight Barking, and that book is insane. Absolutely insane. But the first book I thought was great, and Cruella de Vil is just such a good villain. The next was bards. So the book had to involve bards, storytellers, traveling minstrels, things like that. Hard mode for this was the character is explicitly called a bard. So I didn't tick hard mode for this, but for this I read Raymond E. Feist. I read Magician. I read the whole Rift War trilogy. And Laurie is a bard in this. He carries around a lute. He travels. He is a traveling musician. I didn't take hard mode because I'm pretty sure he's not called a bard. He's called a musician, or he just kind of travels around as a minstrel. And yeah, so this was my selection. The next was prologues and epilogues. Hard mode had to have both. For this, I had A Tale of Magic, which only had a prologue, so I didn't get hard mode. But it's A Tale of Magic by Chris Colfer, which is a young adult story, middle grade story about a girl who finds out she has magic and is a fairy and has to go to a school to discover more about that. The next was self-published / indie. The hard mode for this was it had to be less than 100 ratings. And I think this book, The Truth Beyond the Sky by Andrew M. Crusoe, had like 104 ratings. It only had like 19 reviews or something, but technically didn't hit hard mode. And I did not enjoy this book. That's all I'm going to say. I gave it 1 star. I did not enjoy it, but it was quite inspiring for me to write my own book because so it did a good job in that sense, maybe. The next was Romantasy. I'm not a big Romantasy reader. I've read Fourth Wing, and I thought it was dreadful. But actually, I read Just Stab Me Now by Jill Bearup, and this is a spin on the Romantasy genre because I would describe it as a fantasy romance, similar to A Princess Bride, that kind of thing. But it has very great big elements of meta-narrative. So it's like A Princess Bride meets Stranger Than Fiction, in that the author inserts themselves into the story and has a go at the characters for not doing what she wants them to do. This all started off as a series of shorts on YouTube by Jill Bearup, and she kind of condensed those and put those into a book. I've never seen the shorts before, but I bought this on Kindle because I'm a fan of her videos. She's a stage combatant and kind of reviews armor and reviews fight scenes and things like that. And I thought the book was really good. I really enjoyed it. Now let's go down the next row. So the next was Dark Academia. So it's things that fit the dark academia aesthetic. I didn't really know what that meant, so I googled Dark Academia, and the picture of Dorian Gray was on the Wikipedia page. And it was a book I had on my Kindle, and I wanted to read it, so I read it. I thought it was okay. Hard mode is that the school itself is ordinary and not magical, I think was hard mode. This didn't even have a school in it, so I don't really know how it fits the Dark Academia theme. But hey, it was on the Wikipedia page, so I'm counting it. Next was multi-POV. So hard mode for this was at least 5 POVs, and I read Set in Stone, a Twisted Tale novel by Mary Mancusi, which is what if Madam Mim switched the sword and the stone around and what Arthur pulled was a fake. I think this had 3, maybe 4. So you had Arthur, you had the new character Guinevere, and you had Madam Mim, and maybe you had Merlin. So I think you had 4 POVs, so it didn't quite hit hard mode, but it still hit it. Next up was a book published in 2024. I think hard mode for this was if it was a debut, but I might be wrong on that. This is Thunder City by Philip Reeve. This is the latest book in the Mortal Engine series, a series that I absolutely adore. This was another great book. New characters, new settings, just really, really enjoyable. The next was a character with a disability. I don't know why this thing hasn't come through here properly, but the hard mode was the character had to be the main character. So for that, I read The Christmasaurus and the Winter Witch, which I read to my kids. This is hard mode because William Trundle is in a wheelchair, and he's the main character of the book. I thought this was really good. I didn't think it was quite as good as the first book, but still really, really enjoyable. So 4 stars from me on that. The next was a book published in the 90s. This is the reread one for me. When you're doing this, you're allowed 1 reread. And I read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone to my kids. Hard mode was the author had to have released something in the last 5 years or something. And J.K. Rowling has done that. So, so this ticked hard mode. I gave this 5 stars. It's one of my... I loved reading it to the kids, and the kids are now in I really enjoyed the magic of it, and we're reading the second one right now before bed. Next, let me scroll down. Oh, if I do this, then I could do the last two. There we go. There we go. So the last two rows: Orcs, Trolls, and Goblins. Oh my! This was you had to read a book with Orcs, Trolls, and Goblins in them, and the hard mode was it had to be the main character. And I read Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree, where the main character is Viv, an orc who goes adventuring, gets injured, and ends up in the town of Merk, trying to help out, and ends up helping out at the local bookshop. The next was space opera, which is a genre I still don't really know quite how to define. I think it's one of those things you know when you see it. And hard mode for this was, I think the person had to be LGBT, I want to say. I can't quite remember off the top of my head what the hard mode is for that. But I read Heretic, a self-pub book by Craig Martell and Brad Torgensen. This was space battles, different races of all animal people all coming together to try and find out the origin of the species. A bit of politics, but not very much. So I think this fit the space opera theme. And yeah, it was okay. 3 stars. Next was an author of color. This I read Mallory Blackman, Noughts and Crosses. This was an incredible book. Everyone needs to read this book. I think it was so impactful, so harrowing at points, but so true, so honest, just brilliant. I can't remember what hard mode is for this one, but this book was so good. You should just go read it now. Fact. Next was survival. Hard mode means for this one was that it couldn't be a plague or a pandemic. And this is Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. This is what if plants overtook England and everyone becomes blind due to a meteor shower, and then the Triffids attack. And it's a story of survival. There is no winning here. It's just about surviving. This book was brilliant. This was so good. I could describe it as a very British apocalypse because it's still full of those British sensibilities, but the details are harrowing. Next was Judge a Book by its cover. I think hard mode was that you couldn't even read the blurb. This one, I didn't even really read the cover. I saw the name of the book, The Legend of Kevin, the roly-poly flying pony, and my son picked it out, and I was like, that sounds great. Let's go for that. I didn't even know what the book was called. Kevin is actually the horse. I thought Kevin was the boy when we first got the book from the library, and then we read it, and it was so funny. This is by Philip Reeve and Sarah McIntyre, by the way. Book was so funny because Kevin loves flying, and he loves eating grass, he loves eating biscuits, but not in that order. And we read the rest of the series. I think there's 4 books, and I think the second one is my favorite. I think it's really funny, but the books are so funny. They're so funny, and the art is great in them as well. My son loved them. Next is set in a small town. So this hard mode was the town had to be in the real world, I think. So I read Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi, and this was really enjoyable. I think it hit hard mode. You never actually find out the name of the small town, but it's in Italy. Everyone else is normal, basically. You do have talking foxes and cats, but Pinocchio is a puppet and he wants to become a real boy. In this, Pinocchio is so flippin' naughty, and he does naughty things every chapter, and he gets his comeuppance for it, regular and often. It was just really entertaining. The next was 5 short stories. And hard mode for this was you had to read a whole short story collection. So I read Happy Bunny and Other Mischiefs by Rebecca Granston. This is a book that the author themselves sent me. It's a horror anthology. Man, some of this book was really weird. I enjoyed it in a way. I also found some of it very scary and very horrifying and very gross. But that's kind of horror, I think. And I did notice that the author had great control of voice and narrative and style whilst delivering these 14 short stories. I think they were in his collection. The next was Eldritch Creatures, and hard mode for this was not connected to the H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu mythos at all. I thought this would be really hard to read because I'm not interested in that kind of thing at all. But I read The Long Earth by Terry Pratchett and Stephen Baxter. And in this, you can travel to parallel Earths, and the main character travels and travels and travels and travels, and eventually they reach this world that's being consumed by this great sentient mass of flesh. And I can't remember what it calls itself. It's like the indefinite principle or something like that. It's completely alien and unknowable, in a far-off world, slowly consuming everything. That's the definition of eldritch horror for me. And so I actually found the answer to that, and hard mode, in a place I wasn't expecting. The next was reference materials. Hard mode for this was it needed to have more than one reference material, more than two. So you've got, I picked the Silmarillion because you have maps, you have a language guide, you have a naming guide, you have a list of characters, you have lots of different paraphernalia that comes with the book. So it hit hard mode, and I loved reading the Silmarillion. I really enjoyed it. Now, the last was book club or read along. This was where they were, I think this is in every bingo board. I've never done this before, so I don't know, but I'm sure that it is, because this is directing people to their subreddit to say, hey, we're doing these read alongs, come join in. You know, it's a farming tool, it's a way to get people into the subreddit. I didn't do that. I instead joined in the read along of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell with Hardy's books, and really, really enjoyed it. I didn't take hard mode because it wasn't on the r/fantasy subreddit, but I still did a read along, and I still was in a book club, and I really enjoyed that. So yeah, that's it. That's the list. I've completed all the boxes. What are my overall thoughts on the bingo board? I enjoyed it. I enjoyed trying to find how things fit. I had a spreadsheet, and I was like, these are all the things I've read. This is how some stuff fits. This is how other things fit. Lots of books fit multiple boxes. So you're kind of shifting things around. So, you know, for example, first in a series, lots of books that I read here fits that box. And so it was fun to move things around. And let me zoom out so you can see the whole thing. Ooh. Ooh. There we go. And it was fun to do that. There was a rule which was everything has to be fantasy, sci-fi, horror, or speculative fiction. And so I did find it narrowed my reading towards these kind of things, because I was like, I really want to complete this bingo board. And there's 25 books here. And so, you know, I usually aim to read about 50 books. Last year I read 100 because there was comics and reading for the kids and stuff. But usually I aim to around 50 books. And so that takes up a lot of your reading to fit this bingo board. And I want to read other stuff that's outside of speculative fiction. I want to read nonfiction and, you know, thrillers and other stuff and tech thrillers, Michael Crichton, and other stuff that doesn't fit in the r/fantasy space. So will I do this again? Probably not, if I'm being honest, because I did find it quite narrowing my reading choices. And I was actively putting off books that I know didn't fit this. And this year, in 2025, I want to be much freer in reading. I've got much looser goals for myself, and I just want to read what I want to read. And so I've done this. I enjoyed it. Will I do it again? Probably not. But then again, I might have a look when it comes out. I might have a look and see what I can do. And there's nothing stopping me from just using non-speculative fiction to do this. So anyway, let me know in the comments below if you've done this bingo board, what you think of my selections, and please give this video a like. Please subscribe if you want to see more. Let me know if this format works for you with me on the small screen. Oh, actually, I can make myself big now, can't I? Can I do that? Yeah, there we go. I've made myself big. I've never done this before, as you could probably tell, and let me know what I can do to make this kind of videos better. This format, this StreamYard format, is good for tier rankings and things like that. So I'll see you in the next one. Now, the last thing you have to do is to get out of my house.